You swore it would be different this time. Different person, different beginning, different feeling in your chest when you first met them. And for a while, it was. Then slowly, so slowly you almost didn't notice, the same things started happening again. The same dynamic, the same hurt, the same version of you, shrinking yourself to keep the peace. And somewhere in the middle of it, a thought crept in that you didn't want to say out loud. Why does this keep happening to me? Most people stop there. They blame their taste, their luck, the fact that good people are just hard to find. Because the other explanation, the real one, asks something much harder of you. It asks you to look inward instead of outward. Not because it's your fault, that's not what this is, but because the pattern may not be random. And somewhere inside you, some part of you already knows that. You meet someone, there's an immediate pull, intense, electric, familiar in a way you can't quite explain. They're charismatic, confident. They seem to see you in a way other people don't. They say the right things at exactly the right moment. And you feel it. That rare feeling of being truly understood. So you lean in, and why wouldn't you? That feeling is intoxicating. It's what everyone wants. But here's the strange part. That feeling of instant, overwhelming connection, that sense of being completely seen by a near stranger isn't always a sign of something rare and beautiful. Sometimes it may be a sign that something familiar has been triggered. Psychologists use the term repetition compulsion to describe a tendency to repeat familiar emotional patterns, sometimes even painful ones. One possible reason is that familiar patterns can feel more predictable to the nervous system, even when they aren't healthy. Not happiness, not health, just known. If you grew up in an environment where love felt unpredictable, where affection had to be earned, where someone's mood determined whether you felt safe that day, you may have learned a specific template for what closeness feels like, and that template can influence what feels familiar in future relationships. Not because you want to be hurt, but because the brain naturally looks for patterns it recognizes. Sometimes, without realizing it, we may try to resolve an old emotional problem in a new relationship, hoping that this time the ending will be different. So when someone walks in who fits that pattern, someone emotionally unpredictable, someone who gives and withdraws, someone who makes you work for their warmth, something in you may light up. Not despite the warning signs, because they feel familiar. Maybe they canceled plans without a real explanation. Maybe their mood shifted in a way that made you feel like you'd done something wrong, even when you hadn't. Maybe there were moments of real warmth, followed by a coldness that left you confused and quietly desperate to get back to the warmth. And instead of stepping back, you tried harder. You became more understanding, more patient, more available. You bent yourself into shapes you didn't know you could bend into, all trying to stabilize something that was never stable to begin with. That's not weakness. It may be a pattern that has become so familiar that you respond to it before you even fully understand what's happening. Most people never notice this. For some people, especially those who grew up having to manage someone else's emotions, being needed can become closely connected with feeling loved. If there was chaos at home and your role was to smooth it over, read the room, or make sure everyone was okay, then calm, reciprocal love may initially feel unfamiliar, even boring, like something is missing. So when someone comes along who creates chaos, who needs to be managed, soothed, understood, or decoded, it can feel like intimacy. It isn't, but it can feel that way. And that feeling is extraordinarily hard to argue with. People with unhealthy relationship patterns may sometimes gravitate toward people who are warm, empathetic, and willing to give others the benefit of the doubt. People who believe in potential over pattern. People who were taught somewhere along the way that love requires sacrifice and endurance. It's not that you're naive, it's that you're genuinely good. And that goodness, without healthy boundaries, can sometimes become something other people take advantage of. The cruelest part of this whole thing is that the very qualities that can make you vulnerable, your empathy, your loyalty, your capacity to see the best in people, are also the things that make you extraordinary. They just need protecting. You enter a relationship with genuine hope. Things feel intense and promising. Warning signs appear but feel explainable. Everyone has baggage, you tell yourself. You give more. They take more. You start to feel responsible for their emotional state. You lose track of your own needs somewhere in the middle of managing theirs. The relationship ends. Either they leave or you finally do. And you're left exhausted, confused, and somehow blaming yourself. Then, after some time, you meet someone new, and something about them feels familiar. Breaking this cycle doesn't start with simply choosing better people. That's the instinct. To be more careful, more guarded, more selective. And while awareness matters, changing the pattern on the outside often starts with understanding what's happening on the inside. You may find yourself responding strongly to signals that resemble something you've experienced before, sometimes mistaking intensity for depth or chemistry for compatibility. The work isn't about becoming someone who doesn't feel things deeply. That's not the goal. The goal is learning to tell the difference between a feeling that's pointing you towards something healthy and a feeling that's pointing you back towards something unresolved. That's not a small thing to learn. It takes time, it takes honesty, and it almost always requires sitting with a question most people avoid. What did love feel like when you first learned what it was? Not what you were told it should feel like. What it actually felt like. In your body, in your chest, in the way you watched the people around you. Was it steady? Or did it come in waves? Was it something you received freely? Or something you learned to earn? Because whatever the answer is, that experience may have shaped what your nervous system recognizes as familiar. And sometimes, what feels familiar can influence what you reach for again and again, even when your conscious mind wants something completely different. When you start doing the actual work, therapy, honest self-reflection, learning to sit with your own discomfort instead of managing everyone else's, healthy relationships can initially feel unfamiliar or even uncomfortable. Someone who is consistently kind, who doesn't create chaos, who actually shows up, can feel almost boring if you've learned to associate love with uncertainty. That discomfort isn't necessarily a sign that you've chosen wrong. It may simply mean you're experiencing something different, something your mind hasn't learned to trust yet. It passes. Slowly, but it passes. The people who break this pattern aren't the ones who stop caring. They're not the ones who become cold, closed off, or cynical about love. They're the ones who get curious about themselves, who stop asking, why does this keep happening to me? And start asking, what inside me recognizes this as familiar? That shift is everything, not because it fixes the past, it doesn't, but because it can change what you reach for next. Think about the last person you let in who hurt you, not with blame, not with bitterness, just, honestly, what felt familiar about them the moment you met? What were you hoping, somewhere underneath the surface, that this time would finally be different? That question is worth sitting with longer than it's comfortable to sit with. If this helped you understand yourself or someone you love, subscribe to Serenity Mind for more psychology-based videos about relationships, human behavior, and emotional patterns.